Today on Face the Nation, the U.S. and its allies launch a targeted missile strike on Syria in retaliation for last week's chemical attack that killed dozens of civilians.
These are not the actions of a man. They are crimes of a monster instead.
President Trump said the strike was perfectly executed and that the mission was accomplished. But some in Congress say the strikes didn't go far enough. Either way, the question remains, what exactly is the strategy in Syria and the conflict that's now in its 7th year? Ambassador Nikki Haley has been leading the diplomatic effort at the United Nations.
If the Syrian regime uses this poisonous gas again, the United States is locked and loaded. When our president draws a red line, our president enforces the red line.
We'll talk with Ambassador Haley, then with Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine. He called the strikes illegal and reckless since the president did not seek the approval of Congress before the attack. Plus, the president's legal problems intensify after the FBI raids his personal attorney's office and home. Michael Cohen is now the subject of a criminal investigation into his business, which may impact his sole client, President Trump. And another headache for the president as former FBI Director James Comey's tell-all book is released. We'll have analysis on all the news and what's next in Syria coming up on Face the Nation. Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. I'm Margaret Brennan. Friday night's strike in Syria was launched by British, French, and U.S. aircraft, ships, and a submarine. Over 100 missiles were fired at 3 sites in Syria that the U.S. identified as chemical weapons facilities. Syrian attempts to shoot them down failed, and Russian forces held their fire, avoiding the escalation that U.S. officials had feared. Defense Secretary Mattis called it a heavy strike, but a one-time shot that set the Syrians' chemical weapons program back for years. CBS News foreign correspondent Seth Doane and his team are in Damascus under the supervision of the Syrian government. Seth, what's the latest?
Good morning to you, Margaret. The advances here that the Syrian forces have made going into Douma is the big news this morning, regaining control of that area that had been held by the rebels. And that is quite significant because it likely gives chemical weapons inspectors access to that site.
Now, you did get access to one of the sites that was hit in that Allied show of force on Friday. What did you find?
We got into one of the areas that had been a research facility here in Damascus, a sort of university. We were there as it was still smoldering and firefighters were still putting out the fire. These buildings had been completely destroyed. Now, this is a site that the U.S. government, the Pentagon, says is key to the development of biological and chemical weapons here in Syria. We met a scientist who was there on the site who told us he had worked there for 38 years, and he said they were not developing chemical weapons there. It is just another example here in Syria where you are hearing very different facts or allegations from both sides of this conflict.
The Trump administration says it's not going to intervene in the civil war. Will Friday's strike have any impact on the course of the conflict?
There is a real defiance that we have seen on the ground here in Syria. What we have seen from the Syrian government is a determination to move forward and make it appear as though it is business as usual. You saw those pictures that were released right away by the Syrian presidency and the propaganda wing here showing Bashar al-Assad walking into buildings, appearing unfazed following these airstrikes.
Seth Doane, thank you for your reporting there from the bustling capital of Damascus. Very different images than what we saw in that area hit by that alleged chemical attack just nearby. We're joined now by the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She is in New York this morning. Good morning to you, Madam Ambassador. The White House said there have been reports that since April of last year, there have been at least 30 continued chemical weapons attacks in Syria, some involving sarin. Why did this particular attack last week warrant military action, but the others didn't?
Good morning, Margaret. Well, I think that obviously this was cumulative. Assad had been using chemical weapons multiple times, but more so this was about the Security Council resolutions. We had, up until this point, had 6 different resolutions that would have dealt with investigative mechanisms for chemical weapons, and Russia had vetoed all of them. And so we felt like we had gone through every diplomatic measure of talking that we could, and it was time for action. And I think one thing that we hope Assad got the message on is the international community will not allow chemical weapons to come back into our everyday life, and the fact that he was making this more normal and that Russia was covering it up, all of that has to stop.
Are there any consequences for Assad's patrons, Russia and Iran, who continue to protect him?
Absolutely. So you will see that Russian sanctions will be coming down. Secretary Mnuchin will be announcing those on Monday if he hasn't already, and they will go directly to any sort of companies that were dealing with equipment related to Assad and chemical weapons use. And so I think everyone is going to feel it at this point. I think everyone knows that we sent a strong message, and our hope is that they listen to it.
Well, the U.S. strikes, while they hit their targets, they still left the Assad regime in place, along with all those instruments of Russian and Iranian backing. Senator Lindsey Graham, who you know well, has said he fears this is a weak military response. So what is the U.S. plan for follow-up?
Well, make no question about it. This was a very strong response. I mean, first of all, we went after their storage facilities where they kept components. We went after their massive research facility, which was the heart of their chemical weapons program, and we went after their production facility. So this was very strong attack on the chemical weapons program. We were not looking for war. That's the last thing the president wanted, was war. We were not looking to kill people. That was not something that in our American values we would want to do. We wanted to send a strong message that they needed to stop the chemical weapons program. We wanted, with the political and diplomatic actions that we're taking now, we wanted their friends, Iran and Russia, to know that we meant business and that they were going to be feeling the pain from this as well. But our goal was not to start war, and our goal was not to kill people. Our goal was to send a very strong message to Assad and his friends that we are not going to watch them continue to use chemical weapons on their people.
But there is concern that there's a risk. Without diplomatic follow-up, this just looks like muscle flexing. In your assessment, has Assad won this war?
This was not muscle flexing. We set their chemical weapons program back years. So from that standpoint, when we look at threats to our American national interests, we definitely did exactly what we wanted to do.
But Assad's military has reclaimed the area where these chemical weapons were used. He's declaring victory there.
Look, Assad has made inroads in terms of taking back property and land and all of those, but that's what the Geneva process is for. We're very involved in the political process of trying to get to a constitution, of trying to allow the people to elect who's going to lead them. Our job was never to take Assad out. Our job was never to start a war. And so what we have done is we've continued to stay involved diplomatically. We will see that through in terms of the political solution. From a military standpoint, we felt like, along with our allies, we needed to make a strong message towards them that Russia can cover up in the United Nations, but Russia cannot cover up when it comes to military strikes on Syria. And I think that message was heard loud and clear around the world. And so we feel very good about the message that was sent. It is now up to Bashar al-Assad to see if he's smart enough to receive that message.
When you say the Geneva process, that's the Obama-era UN-led process that has been stalled for years, that would have Assad eventually negotiate. Are you open to direct talks with the Assad regime, between the U.S. and the Assad regime?
Well, let's be clear. This is a process that's being handled in the United Nations that has been ongoing and constant. So these talks, they come together. What has happened up until now is Syria has refused to come to the table to negotiate, but Russia and all of the other actors involved are coming to the table, and now it's Russia's turn to deliver Syria to the table for that political process. So it's moving. It's not moving near as fast as any of us want it to move, but this is a political process that needs to happen. This is not something that we need to militarily go and do regime change. This is something that we have to make sure a political process goes through. The United Nations is the right place to facilitate that because they do bring all of the actors to the table. And, we all hope for a political solution for the sake of the Syrian people.
So no direct talks between the U.S. and Syria at this point?
No, and we would never want to have direct talks with Syria at this point. They're not worthy of talks with the United States. They have done nothing but brutalize their people and destroy their land, all in the name of power. And so our goal is that, yes, we will be at the talks as we have been related to the Geneva process. The United States is always there and will continue to be there. But no, we are not going to have any one-on-one talks with Assad.
President Trump says he intends to bring U.S. troops home from Syria. If he does that in the next 6 months, as he said he's wanted to do, doesn't that cede the battleground to Iran?
Well, we haven't said that we're going to bring them home in 6 months. What we are saying is at some point we want to see our military come home. That is obviously the end goal. But there are 3 things that we have to do to get there. First of all, the president's made it very clear we cannot have chemical weapons usage anywhere, and we will continue to combat that in any way we need to protect American interests. Secondly, we want to make sure that they understand that ISIS has to be defeated completely and wholly in a way that we know that we have stabilized the region. We have made fantastic progress on that front, but we're not going to stop until we know that that area is free of ISIS. And then thirdly, we want to make sure that the influence of Iran doesn't take over the area. They continue to cause problems throughout the region, and we want to make sure that there is a hold. The president has asked the allies to step up and do more when it comes to Syria, and so all of these things are being done in the name of bringing our military home.
Ambassador, the president called the FBI raid on his personal attorney's home an attack on our country in a true sense. He's fired off a number of tweets this morning about the fired FBI director, calling him a slime ball, suggesting he should be jailed. What is the president's state of mind?
Well, I have spent multiple times with the president at the White House and on the phone this past week, and his state of mind was very much focused on Syria, chemical weapons, getting the options that were there, making sure we were not doing anything to cause casualties of human life, whether it was our allies or of the Syrian people. His focus was very much on making sure we knew all of the information so that we didn't make a misstep, and waiting it out to make sure that if we were going to do this, we were going to do it right.
But is it right to consider this an attack on our country?
Well, first of all, I have been drowning in all things Syria, North Korea, and Iran. So I can't, I'm sorry, I don't have enough information on anything related to Comey or all of those things. I haven't watched TV to watch that. I've been very focused on foreign policy. I think the president's been focused on foreign policy from the meetings I have been in. So I can only talk about those issues.
All right. Ambassador, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks so much, Margaret.
We want to go now to Richmond, Virginia, and Senator Tim Kaine. Good morning to you, Senator. You've called these strikes illegal and reckless. The Trump administration says Article 2 of the Constitution gave the president clearly the powers to take this action. Why do you think they're wrong?
Margaret, I was interested to hear Ambassador Haley talk about our hope that we would get to a Syrian constitution. I hope President Trump will follow the American Constitution. It's very, very clear. Congress has the power to declare war, and only Congress. So if you're initiating war against a sovereign nation like Syria that hadn't declared war on the United States, it's only Congress that can do it. President Trump is not a king, he's a president. He's supposed to come to Congress to seek permission to initiate a war. As Ambassador Haley said, they've been following these chemical weapons attacks for months. They clearly had time to come to Congress to seek our permission. And this is really important, Margaret. It's not just about the Constitution, it's about the value underlying the Constitution. The framers basically said, if we're going to order our troops to risk their lives, put them in a situation where they can kill others, be killed or wounded themselves, then there has to be a debate and a vote by Congress to say this is in the national interest. The president flouting this and saying, I can do it without Congress. What's to stop him from starting a bombing campaign against Iran or North Korea or some other nation and saying, well, I think it's in the national interest. It's illegal because he didn't come and ask permission. Moreover, it's reckless because, as you pointed out, there isn't a strategy. We need to defeat ISIS, but we hear different things from the administration. Are we staying there now to topple Assad, to counter Iran, to check Russia, to help the Kurds, to buttress Israel, to rebuild our relationships with Turkey. They haven't laid out a strategy, and military action shouldn't be taken as a one-off. It should be taken as part of a strategy.
So do you not think the U.S. should have taken action in the wake of a chemical attack?
Margaret, when President Obama came to Congress on exactly the same instance in 2014, saying Syria's used chemical weapons against civilians, Congress should give authority for us to take military action. I voted for that as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. But the president was doing it the right way. He came forward with a plan.
Well, he wasn't going to get the full support of Congress on that one.
Well, look, we got a resolution out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It was on the floor of the Senate, and then Syria said, we'll give up our weapons stockpile. But as you know, Margaret, in 2014, at that point,
they did not,
Citizen Donald Trump said the president can't constitutionally do this without coming to Congress. Mike Pompeo, as a House member, currently being considered as Secretary of State, said the president needs Congress. I'm very troubled that this is a president who seemed to understand what the Constitution required when President Obama was in office, but now he thinks he's a king and he can do whatever he wants without Congress.
You mentioned Mike Pompeo. The CIA director was before your committee this week testifying as he sort of auditions for this role of Secretary of State. You voted for him as CIA director. Will you vote for him to be the next Secretary of State?
Margaret, I've decided to vote against him to be Secretary of State. I did vote for him as CIA director. He has an intel background that I thought suited him for the position. But look, we have a president who is anti-diplomacy. And I worry that Mike Pompeo has shown the same tendency to oppose diplomacy. He was not just against the Iran deal when he was a House member, but he spoke about the relative ease of wiping out Iran's nuclear capacity with a bombing run.
Well, Senator, that's significant that you're
change.
saying that you're not going to vote for him, because this would mean he's the first nominee to be Secretary of State to not get a favorable recommendation by that committee. But this still doesn't stop him from becoming America's top diplomat. He can still get
you're
confirmed.
right. We're going to have a floor vote, and I'm telling you what my vote is. I don't want a Secretary of State who is going to exacerbate the President Trump's tendencies to oppose diplomacy. You've seen President Trump try to underfund the State Department and USAID, not appoint key ambassadors, tweet out insults about foreign leaders, back the United States out of international agreements and organizations. We do not need a Secretary of State who's going to exaggerate those tendencies. We need a Secretary of State who's going to stand up for strong diplomacy, and I don't believe that's Director Pompeo's inclination.
Sir, I also want to ask you, because you were, of course, the running mate in the 2016 election on the Hillary Clinton ticket. You've harshly criticized former FBI Director James Comey for his decision to make it public that he was reopening that investigation into the Clinton emails. He spoke to ABC News about his justification for doing so, and I want to play that for you now.
I was operating in a world where Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump. And so I'm sure that it was a factor. Like I said, I don't remember spelling it out, but it had to have been that she's going to be elected president. And if I hide this from the American people, she'll be illegitimate the moment she's elected, the moment this comes out.
What do you make of that explanation?
Margaret, the FBI has two real clear rules. Don't talk about a pending investigation, and don't inject controversy right before an election. They followed those rules with respect to the ongoing investigation into Donald Trump at the time. They didn't follow the rules with respect to Hillary Clinton. There was a clear double standard. But look, I have so much on my plate to worry about today and tomorrow that I'm not spending time thinking about 2 years ago. I'm trying to get a president to follow the Constitution. I'm trying to make sure that if we are putting our military troops in harm's risk. I got a kid in the military, and Virginia is very, very connected to the military mission. There's got to be a strategy. Those are the things that I'm focused on.
Well, your voice and face are in some RNC ads with your criticism of the director. So I thought it was important to have you comment directly on that. You still stand by your criticism of him.
Jim Comey, in my way of thinking, is a good man who made a very consequential blunder. Good people make mistakes all the time. It just so happened that the double standard blunder that he made had a huge consequence.
Senator, thank you very much.